Welcome into the Skol Purple Podcast, episode number 30. Finally, at number 30 here on the Skol Purple Podcast YouTube channel. We're joined by a very special guest here momentarily, Andrew with the Lions Fan Report. And looking forward to talking to him about Lions Vikings. That's coming up here on Sunday. So, first of all, let's get you rolling with the countdown. And of course, we got to get the Skol chant going, especially after a rough loss in week 2 to Philadelphia. So, Andrew from Lions Fan Report coming up next on the Skol Purple Podcast. And welcome into the Skol Purple Podcast, episode number 30. And we are joined by Andrew of Lions Fan Report to give us the dirty stuff on the Lions, I guess is one way to put it. I couldn't think of anything else at the moment, but Andrew, it's good to have you on. Finally got you on. We wanted to get you on for a season preview, but it's a good time to get you on before a Vikings-Lions game. How you doing today?
Man, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on, and I gotta say, hey, I'm sorry for the loss on Monday against the Eagles, but looking forward to this game coming up. The first divisional game, at least for the Lions. I know you guys played the Packers, so
Yep.
always happy to talk about football, especially Lions Vikings football.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, let's get a little bit of a preview from you, if you will. Let's talk a little bit about what the Lions have done through the first couple of weeks. Obviously, they played this same Philadelphia team that the Vikings got shellacked by on Monday night. They actually made a concerted comeback in that game. They were down. Can't remember what they exactly were down in that game, but they were able to come back, and then they still fell 38-35. Talk a little bit about your thoughts, I guess, from that game, and what were your takeaways there?
Yeah, I think first and foremost for me, I think the biggest thing heading into this season, I think just primarily our ability to run the football on offense, and I think DeAndre Swift now in year 3, he's really taken that next step, and he's always been a really talented football player, but it's about, hey, can you be a player that we can rely on to help us win football games? And that's exactly what he's done through the first 2 weeks of the game. So I think at least from that first game, the number one thing that stood out to me was DeAndre Swift in the run game. And then also defensively last year, Lions were one of the worst teams when it came to the pass rush. That was an area that we really struggled in, really didn't do a whole lot in being able to collapse the pocket or create pressure. And through these first 2 weeks, this Lions defensive line has done a phenomenal job. And I got to really give credit to our defensive coordinator, Aaron Glenn, who's done a great job scheming up a bunch of different schemes for this Detroit Lions defensive front. So I think from a year ago, this run game has just taken that next step with DeAndre Swift, and we're finally creating that pressure, which has really helped our team, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Well, yeah, and then of course the acquisition of Aiden Hutchinson with the draft, second pick of the draft. I mean, that was obviously a good pick because a lot of people had him going there to the Lions in mock drafts. What has he brought to the table through the first couple of weeks? It seems like he is on a rampage for you guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you come off a 3 sack game as a rookie, which I think was a franchise record for the Detroit Lions, obviously you're doing something right. And what I love about Aiden Hutchinson specifically is he truly embodies everything that this team is about, and that's just hard work, grit, give 100% effort every single rep, and that's the number one thing that stands out to me when I watch Aiden Hutchinson play is just the fact that he's relentless on every snap. He's given it 110% every single rep. And like I said earlier, as great as Aiden Hutchinson has been through these first two games, I do want to recognize that a lot he hasn't. I think one area he needs to improve on is winning those one-on-one matchups against the offensive linemen, because a lot of the sacks that he got against the Washington Commanders was primarily, I think, more our defensive coordinator scheming up situations for him to be able to create those sacks, as well as Carson Wentz holding on the ball for a really long time. So Aiden Hutchinson, as great as he's been, he still is developing. I think he kind of relies a lot on that bull rush. So he's still looking to improve on developing that second move. But regardless, like when you're coming off a 3-sack game, like you're doing something right. So he embodies everything this team's about. And it's just, we haven't really had a player on the edge like that for quite some time now. So it's been exciting to watch him. And obviously he's the hometown hero. So excited to kind of see where he's able to improve moving forward.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Commanders game. Obviously, you guys were able to get your first win of the season, and you guys dominated for most of that game. Obviously, the Commanders kind of made a little bit of a comeback there, but you guys were able to hold them off. What did you see in that game? What did you like about the effort, and what were some things that maybe did concern you in that game?
Yeah, I think for me, it was like you said, the first half was probably some of the most dominant, just every phase of the game, special teams, defense, offense, everything was just rolling perfectly. And I hadn't seen a Detroit Lions team just absolutely dominate every phase of the game like they did. And like you said, they got up to, I think it was, excuse me, 22-point lead heading into the second half. And it was just everything was working. The run game was effective. Our defense, I mean, I think the one stat that really stood out to me specifically is that the Commanders did not, I'm pretty sure they did not get one first down in the first half. The Lions defense prevented them from getting a single first down in the first half. And to me, that's just dominant performance. Like you can't question that. It's perfection. So I just loved how complete this offense and defense looked in the first half. I think for me, the only thing that was slightly concerning to me is that in the second half, you could tell the Commanders really made some good adjustments, and they did really battled quite hard and nearly made a comeback victory at the end there. But the Lions, at the end of the day, found a way to win, and that's really what it's been all about. Is like, can this team find a way to win when they're playing with a lead, which is something we don't normally, or is not a situation that we're normally in. So I think all in all, like again, it took us to last year. It was week 12 against you guys for us to get our first win, and here we are sitting week 2 with our first win. So as a Lions fan, like you're loving every moment of it.
Yeah, it's interesting how I think sometimes we take for granted the Vikings being the way they are. I mean, obviously we have lots of heartbreaks, but it seems like the Lions, and maybe you can talk a little bit about this. Seems like the Lions always have heartbreak, and there's like nothing good that comes from Detroit, at least in terms of consistency. So what has it been like? Is this the most excited you've been about a Lions team, I guess, in a while?
Oh, without question, I think just going on Lions Twitter, just talking with fans, like optimism, this is at an all-time high right now, and I think obviously the win, just the, like I think we like you said, we haven't really been able to kind of complete a full game. We get up to these big leads, and then we somehow allow the other team to score a bunch of points and win the game. And the game against the Commanders was the exact opposite. We held on to the lead for the first time. We found a way to win. It's just something we haven't seen in quite some time. So yeah, the optimism right now is at an all-time high. And heading into this game against Minnesota, first divisional game for us, like it's definitely going to be a tough battle. But I mean, I think right now, I mean, most Lions fans, I think, have the expectation that we're going to win this game. And I think we're starting to get into this now that we're heading into week 3. I think a lot of fans are starting to talk about, hey, playoffs could actually be a legitimate possibility for this football team.
Well, I do agree with you that there is a very good chance that the Lions win this game. But I will caution you as a Vikings fan who knows all too well how things can go downhill quickly. Just be careful, because I have been against being too emotionally invested in this team this year so far, just because I am so used to the Vikings choking in one way or another, and we saw that on Monday night, obviously. But that's why we play 17 games now. It's not always a given that the best team is going to beat the worst team of the two, at least talent wise. So um, I think that is also why I give the Lions a chance to win, because I do think that they have some things that will make it tough for the Vikings to win. Like the offensive line for Detroit seems like they're pretty solid, and the Vikings struggled against a really good Philadelphia offensive line on Monday. And we'll talk more about some of that stuff as well. Before we do get into more Vikings Lions, I want to ask you too. Your thoughts on Dan Campbell, or as I've heard him referred to as Man Campbell, the head coach for the Lions. Obviously, he's a tough guy, and the players absolutely love him. But what more can you give us about Dan Campbell?
Yeah, I think the number one thing that stands out to me about Dan Campbell, especially now in year two, is that just these players, like you said, they love playing for him and they truly embody everything he's about. And I think when it comes to Dan Campbell, especially, he's just such a selfless individual. And what I love about him is that he trusts his coaching staff. He's not the kind of coach that's going to say, "Hey, this is what I want you guys to do." And because I'm smarter than everyone else in the locker room, I'm the head coach, you're going to listen to me. He's truly that kind of individual that understands, like, hey, I have my strengths, I have my weaknesses. I hired you to be my running backs coach. I hired you to be my offensive coordinator for a reason, and that's because I believe in you. And that's the one thing I love about Dan Campbell, especially now in year two, is he's really given that he really has that trust in his coordinators to go out and execute the game plan. And I think that's one of the reasons why this team has been so successful through these first 2 weeks is that it's a collaborative approach. It's not just Dan Campbell being up there. It's not his way or the highway. It's truly a team effort. And that's, I think, something that is just truly special when it comes to Dan Campbell.
Yeah, he seems like a great players coach, and like you said, players just embody what he brings on the table. And I think the fact that he cares about his players, like he does truly care about the players that you guys have, and um,
Yeah.
I don't know if I could say the same about Mike Zimmer when he was when he was the Vikings coach. It didn't seem like he cared much about the players, and obviously some other things that came out afterwards. But it seems like Kevin O'Connell's kind of in that same boat with Dan Campbell in at least some respects of trying to be a player's coach more so than this crusty old man trying to tell everybody how it's got to be his way or the highway.
Right.
So that's something that I do admire about Dan Campbell as well. And now let's talk a little bit about your quarterback, Jared Goff. Obviously, there was a lot of, I'm sure, debate on whether Matthew Stafford should have been traded or not. The Lions obviously did get a haul in return, but maybe the biggest question mark of the return is the quarterback, Jared Goff. Obviously, not a great first season with you guys, but how do you think he's bounced back here through 2 games so far?
Yeah, and I always got to be careful when I answer these questions because when it comes to Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions fan base, we're really split down the middle. There's no middle ground. It's either you love him or you kind of, I don't want to say hate him, but you don't believe in him, right? But I think when it comes
Sounds
to
like the
Jared,
Vikings fans with Kirk Cousins, pretty much.
yeah, I've talked to a few other Vikings fans, and it really does seem that way. So, but I think yeah, when it comes to Jared Goff. I think when you look at the stat sheet, I mean, 6 touchdown throws to 1 interception, like, when you look at his performance and you're just focusing in on the statistics itself, he looks like a top tier quarterback, but I think through these first 2 weeks, he hasn't been perfect, like, there's still question marks in Jared Goff's game, and I there's and the crazy thing is he had a 4 touchdown game performance against the Commanders last week, and there were actually quite a few plays that he left out on the field. There was a He's overthrown a couple deep passes that could have been touchdowns through the first 2 games, and one thing that I think when I evaluate Jared Goff is he's kind of a one-read quarterback. You know, the offensive coordinator calls a play. I think that my guess is the offensive coordinator is telling him, like, "Hey, you need to throw this to this guy," and he's not the kind of quarterback that's gonna manipulate the pocket and go through his reads like Justin Herbert's gonna do. So there have been a few moments through these first 2 weeks where Jared Goff has missed some throws and has forced some passes as well. So it hasn't been perfect, but I think at the end of the day, he's done enough to obviously win us one game and almost beat the Eagles. So it hasn't been perfect, but it could be a lot worse right now. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how he continues to develop through these next 15 games. But I think where he was at last year to where he is today, he's much improved for sure. But there's still a lot of question marks. But can't complain. We've won one game so far, so can't complain.
All right, so now I got to ask you your perspective as a Lions fan when the Vikings hired Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah as the GM and Kevin O'Connell as the head coach. Obviously, there was a lot of drama with the Vikings head coach. Would it be Jim Harbaugh? Would it be somebody else? And then it ends up being Kevin O'Connell. What are your thoughts on the Vikings' new head coach? Do you like him? What are the impressions that you have from him and just the new regime that the Vikings have brought in?
Yeah, well, I think for me personally, I mean, obviously the way it seems like a lot of these teams are going is they're going that direction of hiring that young offensive mind, and it's worked for a lot of different football teams. So I think kind of following that formula made a lot of sense to me, especially considering the talent that you guys do have on offense. So I thought that hiring Kevin O'Connell was a great hire. I'm personally I don't know that much about him to be perfectly honest. I've watched a few interviews here and there, but he seems like a very likable guy, a players coach, like you mentioned. So definitely rooting for him. And then when it comes to your general manager, I was honestly kind of surprised about the pick. I was looking into his background. I think he was like a Wall Street kind of analytical guy. So I thought that was kind of a surprise pick. And obviously, as a Lions fan on draft night, man, boy, was I excited when your GM gave up that 12th overall pick to allow us to go and get Jamison Williams. So I had to kind of sit back and question your GM a little bit for allowing us to trade within the division 20 spots to go get the best wide receiver in the draft. But, at the end of the day, I think you guys are a talented football team. I think it's probably a really nice breath of fresh air to no longer have Mike Zimmer. So when we're not playing each other, I got to say I am rooting for the Vikings. I do like your roster. I do like the direction that your team's headed in. But I do have to say thank you again for Jamison Williams.
Yeah, there's been a lot of disdain, I think, over that decision from Vikings fans as well. And I think the worst thing, in my opinion, about that is that you didn't have to give us a first round pick in return. Plus, I mean, obviously, we took your first round pick late, 32nd overall, and drafted Lewis Seen, but like, I think you guys should have had to give up another first round pick to go up 20 spots like you guys did. And so that's why I was so disappointed with that trade.
I'm not complaining as a Lions fan, though. I love it. I loved it.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't either. I mean, he seems like a talented guy, and I think that's going to be the one of the two that the Vikings also traded with Green Bay, and Green Bay got Christian Watson. I think the Jamison Williams one is going to be the one that could bite the Vikings the most between those two, because it doesn't seem like Christian Watson, through 2 games, a lot of time left for his possible career to turn around, or I should say for his career to possibly turn around. Let me reword that. But it seems like Jamison Williams, once he's healthy, because he tore his ACL, right, in Alabama last year. So I think once he comes back, that's going to be another layer to this offense that already seems like it's improved quite a bit from last season.
Oh, yeah, our offense is, and I gotta give credit. I love to give credit to the coaches. Don't get me wrong. I love, obviously, the players play their part, but this new offensive coordinator, he took over, I think, like halfway through the season last year, and Ben Johnson has done such a phenomenal job through these first 2 weeks. And I think right now the Lions are, I don't have the exact stat off the top of my head, but I think pretty sure we're top 10 in points per game as an offense so far through the first 2 weeks. And the fact that we do have some injuries on the offensive line right now. We haven't added Jamison Williams yet to the mix. Like where we're at now versus where we're going to be at towards the end of the season. Like it's so fun to think about as a Lions fan. And so yeah, Ben Johnson, this offense coordinator, man, he's going to be special. He's a guy to keep your eye out for.
He's got a little bit more of a normal name than Jim Bob Cooter.
That's for sure. Yeah, that was a lot of jokes online about Jim Bob Cooter back in the day.
And I swear the announcers, every time we played the Lions, they would have to say his name like 5 times just because I think they like saying his name.
Yeah, 100%. They wanted to crack a few jokes.
Yeah, I mean, it is literally probably one of the greatest or one of the worst, depending on your point of view, I guess, names of a coach that I've heard in this sport. So definitely quite the name.
Oh yeah.
But
Not quite the coordinator though, but quite the
yeah,
name though for
right,
sure.
right. So yeah, so it's more about not more about the name with Johnson. It's more about what he's been able to do. So that's a good thing for you guys, but maybe not as fun for the TV announcers.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good, man. Well, let's go ahead and talk about the matchup a little bit here. Let's dive into that offense against the Vikings defense, who has been a tale of two games pretty much for the Vikings defense so far. Philadelphia made them look silly, and the week before they looked like a top 5 defense against Green Bay. And then your offense obviously has put up a lot of points through 2 weeks. I've got to say, personally, I am a little bit worried about your offense against our defense because I think our cornerbacks weren't tested that much in week 1 against Green Bay because there was a lot of short passes, quick passes from Rodgers. And then we got tested in week 2 against Jalen Hurts, and things did not go well. So I'm worried about our cornerbacks against Amon-Ra St. Brown and some of the other talented guys that you have, TJ Hawkinson, all these other guys that you guys have on offense. Obviously, DeAndre Swift, I'm worried about him in the running game. Vikings haven't been good in the running game through 2 weeks. But yeah, I am interested to see how the Vikings can get pressure on Jared Goff, if they can or not, because like I said, I think your offensive line's pretty good. Curious to hear your thoughts on that. But Danielle Hunter and Za'Darius Smith, they can pose a threat to a lot of offensive lines, no matter how good they are. So, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think when it comes to Jared Goff, like, I think this is kind of the key to success for the Minnesota Vikings. If you guys want to beat the Lions, is you have to pressure and hit Goff early in the game. He's one of those quarterbacks that I think he really thrives off of feeling confident, and if you're able to kind of, you know, get a few hits on him early, get him, out of rhythm early, he's not the kind of quarterback that's gonna really bounce back from a poor start to a game. So I think from the Vikings perspective, it's like how do we create pressure on Jared Goff and get him out of rhythm early? And I think if you guys can do that, that's gonna be very beneficial because if you're giving Goff time, he's feeling confident, like he can pick apart any defense. And we saw that last week with the Commanders. They were not able to create any pressure whatsoever on Jared Goff, and Jared Goff just pick the Commanders' DBs apart. So yeah, you really have to create pressure early on when it comes to Goff because if you don't, man, he's just going to pick you apart. There's too many weapons on this offense.
Yeah, that's a fact, and I think even like I said, I'm even more scared when Jamison Williams comes back. Like in
Oof.
whatever week we play, he'll probably be back again.
Yeah.
So like that concerns me. But yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the bringing the pressure, like bringing like almost an extra guy, because it seems like the Vikings did not want to blitz Jalen Hurts for whatever reason in week 2, and I think maybe that's part of because of his mobile ability. Last I checked, Jared Goff does not have the mobile ability of Jalen Hurts, so
No, not at
that
all.
that does play in the Vikings' favor. But I am still concerned how if Ed Donatel is actually going to try and bring any pressure, or if he's going to kind of play like he did in on the Monday night game against Philadelphia, where he didn't bring any pressure, like hardly at all game, and Jalen Hurts just picked us apart. So you're kind of saying that they need to bring blitzes early on in the game to try and get to Goff, rattle him.
Yeah, 100%. And like it sounds like too, because when I was watching the Commanders game, they just had a four man front the entire game. Like they didn't do anything with their linebackers, bring their safeties downhill to create more pressure. In the pass game, they just relied on their four-man front, and they have a really good front four. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't effective last week. And again, like you, again, if you guys want to win, like just I've seen Jared Goff play enough. Like you just got to rattle him and just get a few hits on him, create pressure, and Jared Goff isn't going to play well. But if you only rush for the entire game and the Lions' offensive line locks the defensive lineman down, Jared Goff is going to pick your DBs apart. Like that's how I envision what's going to happen on Sunday.
So through two games, how do you see it happening? Do you see the Vikings offense, or the Vikings defense rather, having the edge over the Lions offense, or do you think the Lions offense has the edge in that matchup?
Yeah, that's a tough one for me because this is our first road game, and I really do believe that home field advantage gives each team like quite a bit of an advantage. So definitely playing in Minnesota on the road for the first time this season, I think it definitely plays in your guys' favor. And one thing I'm interested to monitor is the injury report as well, because I saw Harrison Smith had a concussion, and not sure if he'll be available for the game
Right.
on Sunday. So it's it's a tough one because I think you guys obviously got embarrassed on Monday Night Football. I think that um, I feel like your team might be a little bit more motivated than they were heading into the Eagles game, just based on the fact of what happened on Monday night. And to think that, hey, we're playing on the road in Minnesota against a team that's, let's be real, probably pretty pissed off right now. It's good. It's definitely going to be a tough matchup. Like I don't think the Lions win easy in this game. It's they're going to have to work really hard to get the win. But I mean, it's tough for me to really predict which team's going to come out on top. I think they're pretty evenly matched across the board, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. If the Vikings are able to get pressure on Jared Goff, I think the Vikings, honestly, they could just walk away with the game pretty easily. But like you said, if they aren't able to get pressure, or if the Lions are somehow able to get things figured out where they bring more guys up front, more tight ends to chip or whatever, like maybe they're able to help Goff, and maybe he's able to stand in there. But yeah, he's kind of like Cousins in that same regard, where if he has pressure in his face more times than not, he's going to kind of fold.
Yeah, and I think our defensive line has been really, really good through these first 2 weeks. And again, I think it goes more to a credit to our defensive coordinator for scheming up some great packages and some great stunts up front to be able to allow our defensive linemen to get those sacks. So, I mean, I know our defensive line. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, obviously, you've watched us play over the years. Like, it hasn't been the strength of our team in quite some time. But like, this is like the first year where like I think our defensive line is starting to figure it out, and it's definitely going to be a tough task for the Vikings offensive line. Like our defensive line has some playmakers.
Yeah, that's a great transition. Let's talk a little bit about that. The Vikings do have an improved offensive line from past years. Obviously, there's been a lot of issues with the offensive line for many years, but there are pretty well three stalwarts on the Vikings offensive line, I would say right now, and that's Christian Darrisaw, the left tackle, left guard Ezra Cleveland, and obviously the right tackle, the veteran Brian O'Neill. But then you talk about the interior right guard and center, and then you have some major question marks. Garrett Bradbury has been underwhelming through two games. He's been underwhelming pretty much since the Vikings drafted him. So that's a major concern if they are able to put Aiden Hutchinson inside, or if they have somebody inside. I guess I'm interested to hear, who are your D tackles right now?
Yeah, so right now we have Aleem McNeil and Isaiah Buggs, and they're both more in like the nose tackle build. So they're really
Okay.
good against the run. They're not so good at creating interior pressure. But like what you just mentioned, like they love lining up Aiden Hutchinson in the interior to take advantage
Hmm.
of those guards. So I think that's another thing about this Detroit Lions football team in our roster is the defensive line. We have a lot of depth there. And then we have something called the NASCAR package, which is where basically instead of having two D tackles, we replace the D tackles with two defensive ends in the interior, like an Aiden Hutchinson, move him inside. So just imagine having four speed defensive ends coming at your offensive line. Like we'd love to run that package. So I wouldn't say we have like an elite defensive tackle, but we have ways where we can scheme players inside, like an Aiden Hutchinson, to take advantage of those guards.
Yep, and that's a good thing that we talked about that, because that is something I do believe that you guys will have to do if you're going to get consistent pressure on Kirk Cousins. I guess I don't know who your other defensive end is, but and you mentioned some of the depth you guys have, but I'm guessing that you're going to probably want to put those defensive linemen inside to really give your guys a chance to create that pressure, because we saw what Kirk does under pressure on Monday night.
Oh yeah, I can guarantee you, Aaron Glenn, our defensive coordinator, was watching that game, and he's just going to take away all the notes from that Eagles defense and just replicate what he saw in order to rattle Kirk Cousins, so that hopefully, I got to say, Lions win. So
Yeah, and we'll get into predictions here shortly as well. But I guess I am still not convinced that the Lions defense is, like a top 15 defense. Like, I think they've given up a lot of points the first 2 weeks of the season. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that. Obviously, you're a little more confident in that defensive line, but what about the rest of the defense? How are the linebackers? How are the safeties and corners? Do you think that they stack up well with the Vikings, or do you think the Vikings wide receivers could have a nice day?
yeah, I think the biggest thing when it comes to the Detroit Lions defense, first as a whole, is that we have a lot of young players that are inexperienced and don't have a lot of reps together. So I think they're still trying to learn like how to play together as one unit, and they've gotten better. It's night and day from where it was a season ago. But I think if you talk to any Lions fan, I think the one concern that we have heading into this game, it really is going to be stopping your wide receivers and Jefferson and Thielen, because our cornerbacks, obviously we drafted Jeff Okuda number 3 overall 3 years ago. He's coming off a torn Achilles, and he's been great the first 2 weeks. Like, I mean, for considering he's a player coming off a major injury like that, like he's exceeded all expectations. But I think this week against Justin Jefferson will really kind of dictate whether or not Jeff Okuda is truly a lockdown cornerback. Because while I think our DBs had played solid, they still have a lot to prove. So I think that's the one area on our defense where I'm a bit concerned heading into this game, is the fact that there's a good chance that your receivers could just absolutely take advantage of our cornerbacks. So we'll see what happens, but definitely it's going to be a challenge for our DBs.
So what I'm hearing from both of us is it's going to depend on what happens with the pressure. Are we able to get
Hmm.
pressure on Jared Goff? Are you able to get pressure on Kirk Cousins? Because if both of those things happen, then boy, this could be a 3-0 game or something.
Yeah, it might be a defensive outing kind of game. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, no, I agree. I think both of them being kind of pocket passers, not having that rushing element, and sometimes struggling against the pass rush. Like, I really do think I agree. Like, I think at the end of the day, whoever's defensive line plays better is going to win the game.
Yeah, and I will say that I think if both quarterbacks are able to get consistently protected, I do think it could very well go the other way as well, where it could
Yeah,
be an absolute just yeah, a scoring fest, I guess. I'm thinking of the wrong word, but you know what I'm saying. So I could
yeah, yeah.
definitely see it going either way.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so excited for this game. Like, it's gonna be this Lions team has been really fun to watch through the first 2 weeks, and I think this is probably one of the biggest games of the season for us, just because of the fact that we've never put double digit or back to back wins under the Campbell era. So we had an opportunity to go in, get first place in the NFC North, and prove that, hey, we can hang with the best of them. And I really do think the Vikings are a good football team. I Even though obviously what happened Monday night was a disaster, I don't think they're as bad as they were on Monday night. And I think that's the fun part about this year for the NFC North, is that it's truly wide open. It's anyone's division at this point.
Well, maybe not the Bears.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's true. I totally, yeah, yeah. No, I don't. I go at it with the Bears fans on Twitter quite a bit, so I'll try to be nice with what I have to say about the Bears. But yeah, maybe it really is down to just Packers, Lions, Vikings.
I tell you what, though, I was a little concerned after that week 1 game. I was like, whoa, the Bears might actually be okay. And they still might be okay, but they did not look the part against
Oh
Green
no.
Bay on Sunday Night Football.
Not at all. So yeah, no, I'm not very optimistic about the Bears. That's for sure. Definitely much more optimistic about these other three teams.
Very good. Well, once again, Andrew with Lions Fan Report. Really appreciate him coming on. Before we let you go, a couple of predictions for you before we finish things up here. First of all, we got to get the game predictions in, and I am going to give mine first. And I'm going to say this is something I had thought of before we even started talking. I think for whatever reason, I do think both offenses will have some success in the game. And I'm going to say 31-27. I am going to pick the Vikings to win this game. I do think that the Vikings will make enough plays. It's at home, US Bank Stadium. The crowd was fired up, ready to go week 1. I think they're going to be ready to come out in week 2 and get a win over the Lions. I think the crowd's a lot more into it this year than what they were in the last couple of years with Mike Zimmer. So I do expect the Vikings to come out with a win. But at the same time, like I said, I am not as confident in the past as I have been against you guys. So I could see it definitely going the other way.
Yeah, it really is just one of those games where it's like there's not really it's not so obvious, right? Like it really could swing either way, so that's what makes it so much fun. I guess real quick to give my prediction then, I think this is a big game for Dan Campbell and the Lions. Like, obviously, there's a lot of question marks still about this team in general, and this game is going to mean a lot for just kind of the future of this football team because, like I said, we've never won back-to-back games. Optimism, hype is at an all-time high, and usually when we're in these situations where there's so much hype and optimism around the team, we just find a way to fumble the bag and lose the game and just go back into the basement of the NFC North. But I think if we can go into Minnesota, first divisional game of the season, get to 2-1, get a division win, like it says that'll prove to me that this Lions team has truly changed. And that is why I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions to win this football game. It's going to be a real close matchup. I think I do think it'll be pretty high scoring. I'm going to say I'll go Lions 28, Vikings 21. I think it'll be a one-score game, but I think this is the moment for the Lions to prove to the world, like, hey, we're a different team. Everything that you've seen in the past, that's out the window now. We're a truly different football team. Lions go into Minnesota. They get above 500 for the first time under Dan Campbell. We get a division win. It's going to be a close game. It's going to be a hard-fought game. Both teams are extremely talented, but I think the Lions. I think this is their moment to prove everything's changed, and I want to believe in them, and I truly believe things have changed. So 28-21 Lions.
All right. Well, I am interested to know, and maybe you don't know this offhand, but I am interested to know when the last time the Lions did win back-to-back games was. Like, that's had to have been quite a while, right?
Oh my gosh, I'm on a honestly when we're done here, I'm gonna go look that up because I'm curious myself. But yeah, it's been the fact that I can't even remember says everything you need to know about that, right?
Yeah. So yeah, and you know what? That was kind of my mindset after going into week 2. I was like, okay, past Vikings teams probably lose this Monday night primetime game at Philadelphia. I was interested to see, okay, is this a new Vikings team or is it the same? And I still think that the jury's still out on that, but I do think that it was not a good sign, at least in terms of this team doing more than maybe one playoff win. Like, I don't see them
Yeah.
winning more than one playoff game at this moment, but um, I am interested to hear, you mentioned playoffs, the Lions maybe trying to get there for the first time in a while. What is your season prediction for the Lions? Do you see them finishing? Where do you see them finishing record wise? Do you think they make the playoffs?
Yeah. So I think I'll be honest, I'm kind of a cautiously optimistic Detroit Lions fan. And anyone that follows my Twitter knows that. Like my heading into the season, my season prediction was that we were going to win 7 games, pretty much double our win count from the season before. But I think again, just to see just how much improved our team has been through these first 2 games just gives me so much optimism. And I think we probably have a similar schedule, just being in the same division. But like when I look at the teams that we play, like we're playing, the Dallas Cowboys early on in the season with no Dak Prescott. We're playing the New York Jets. We're playing the Carolina Panthers. We're playing the New England Patriots, whose offense has struggled. Like we don't have the hardest schedule. So, you know, being realistic, I my season prediction was 7 wins. But now just how the first 2 weeks have played out and looking at the rest of the schedule, like there's a legitimate chance the Lions could make the playoffs. Do I think we win the division? No. Still think the Packers win the division, but I think there's a way we could get to 10 wins and get one of those wild card playoff spots.
So you're kind of almost like I am with the Vikings. I think I think they'll finish 10-7 with a wild card game, maybe win one. But yeah, so you're kind of in that same boat with the Lions, huh?
Yep. But I also think that hey, if and then this and I feel that way if we beat you guys on Sunday, but if we lose on Sunday and we go 1-2, we lose our first division game, things fall apart, then I'm like, I'm going back to my 7 game prediction. So,
Yeah.
like I
Yeah.
said, this is a big game for the Lions. Big game.
Yeah. Oh, it's a huge game, I think, for both teams. It really is, because the Vikings come off a absolute butt kicking in Philadelphia, and the Lions coming in trying to prove that they belong, like you mentioned. It's a huge game. It really is. You don't like to say that it's got that much implication with just being a week 3 game, but it really does have a lot to do with both teams, I think, and the confidence they have in themselves going forward.
Yeah, may the best team win, man. I mean, I obviously want my Lions to win, but I love the Vikings fans. I went to Michigan State, so I'm a huge Kirk Cousins guy. So, when I'm not, like I said, when I'm not rooting for the Lions, I'm definitely rooting for the Vikings as well.
Yeah. Okay. So now I got to ask you. I can't finish on that. Like, you got to tell me what you think of Kirk Cousins. You said you're a Kirk Cousins guy, but do you think he's like a top 10 type of quarterback in the league?
Yeah, I think he'll always just be on right on outside of that top 10. Like he's somewhere in like that 11 to 15 excuse me, 11 to 15 range, and I just never see him really ever getting into that top 10 quarterback tier. But I do think he's still a really good quarterback, and like he'd be starting on probably on a lot of other teams. There's a lot of teams that
Yeah.
would love to have a Kirk Cousins. So I like him. I root for him. I think he's probably doesn't get as much appreciation around the league as he probably should, but I don't think he'll ever be top 10.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think there are a lot of teams that would take him, but games like Monday night are why he will
Yeah,
not be in the top 10. That's just what
exactly.
I would have to say. Like, he has like 2 or 3 of those types of games in a season. And they usually don't come back to back. I don't think, unless maybe I'm not accurate on that, but they usually don't come back to back, which is one reason why I am confident that the Vikings will come back in this second game and get the win. But
And that
like I
scares me.
said,
That scares me.
but like I said, who knows? Like I said, the Lions are probably the toughest they've been in a long time. So I'm interested to see how it goes. Anything else that you want to mention about the game before we let you go? Final statements here. Anything like playmakers wise? Anybody that you think is really going to have a big game for you guys that's going to make the difference?
Yeah, I think one player I want to talk about real quick is TJ Hawkinson, our tight end, because he's a player that actually, through these first 2 weeks has kind of struggled. And I think part of it, he hasn't been a huge emphasis in the offensive game plan through these first 2 weeks. And he's also struggled with a lot of drops. So I think this is going to be a big statement game for TJ Hawkinson to prove that, hey, these first 2 weeks have just kind of, I'm just getting back into the swing of things, still trying to get that camaraderie going with Jared Goff because as of right now, I mean, he's next year or we picked up his 5th year option. He's eligible for a new contract after this season, but he's been a disappointment through the first 2 games. So I think I would look for TJ Hawkinson to kind of have a big statement game this week against the Vikings.
Yeah, it's a huge week for him. Like you said, he's so talented though, and I'm obviously a little biased because I'm an Iowa Hawkeyes fan. I'm from Iowa, so but he's got a lot of talent. Iowa tight end U, as we like to say. Definitely not QBU if you've seen Spencer Petras play this season, but we are definitely pretty good at having tight ends go to the National Football League throughout the last 20 years or so. So I am hoping for the best for TJ Hawkinson, just not this week.
That's fair. That's fair.
So,
But yeah, we'll
but
see what
yeah, hopefully
happens.
for your sake, he's able to make some big plays, and I could definitely see that because I think he did some good things against us last year, if I remember correctly. So
Yeah, as long as he doesn't pull it, I have to joke around here, but as long as he doesn't pull an Irv Smith Jr.
yeah, oh gosh, man, that was so bad. That was so bad, such a bad drop. But obviously there was a lot of other things that went wrong in that game. But yeah, I was like, you've got to catch that, man. You got to catch that, especially the situation the Vikings were in. But It is what it is. But again, once again, that's Andrew, Lions Fan Report on Twitter at Lions Fan Report. So really appreciate you joining me here, Andrew, and looking forward to hopefully doing some more collabs in the future, man.
Yeah, definitely. Appreciate you having me on, Carson, and enjoy the game on Sunday. And go Lions. Although, yeah, Skol, but hey, one pride always. Let's go Lions.
Well, and as we always say here, Skol.